The luxury yacht cuts through the morning mist as Miranda watches her husband load the last suitcase, his face stone-cold with betrayal. 23 years, Richard, she whispers, clutching the divorce papers that divide everything they built, the one thing she never told him about, as the engine roars to life. She realizes too late that some secrets have a way of surfacing when you least expect them, and the lake that holds her deepest lie is about to become her greatest nightmare. The mahogany conference table stretched between them like a battlefield, polished to mere perfection and reflecting the wreckage of 23 years. Miranda Whitfield sat rigid in her leather chair, manicured fingers drumming against the armrest as her attorney shuffled through the final papers. Across from her, Richard's jaw worked silently, his steel-gray eyes fixed on the window overlooking downtown Portland's glittering skyline. "The lake house goes to Mrs. Whitfield," Attorney Stevens announced, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "As per the prenuptial agreement, all properties acquired during the marriage through joint funds are subject to equal division." But Lake Serenity was purchased with Mrs. Whitfield's inheritance. Richard's head snapped toward Miranda, his face flushing crimson. "That's bullshit, and you know it. I put $200,000 into that place. The dock, the boathouse, the improvements to my property." Miranda interrupted, her voice smooth as silk and twice as dangerous. "Community property laws are quite clear, darling. What's mine stays mine. What's ours gets split." She leaned back, a cold smile playing at her lips. "Perhaps you should have thought about that before you decided to play house with your little secretary." The word secretary dripped with venom, and Richard's hands clenched into fists on the table. Jessica, his attorney, placed a warning hand on his arm. "Mr. Whitfield," Jessica said carefully, "we've been through this. The lake house was purchased with funds from Mrs. Whitfield's father's estate. The improvements, while substantial, don't change the underlying ownership." $200,000, Richard repeated, his voice rising. $200,000 of my money went into that place. The retaining wall, the new septic system, the boathouse," Miranda finished, her smile widening. "Yes, I remember. You were so proud of that project, spent every weekend that summer down there, digging and hammering." She tilted her head, studying him like a specimen under glass. "Amazing how much a man can accomplish when he's trying to hide from his guilty conscience." The barb hit its mark. Richard's face went white, then red again. "You vindictive bitch." Language. "Richard." Miranda's voice remained perfectly composed. "We're in civilized company." Stevens cleared his throat, uncomfortable with the escalating hostility. "Perhaps we should move on to the division of the investment accounts." "No," Richard stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "I want that boathouse. It's on the water. Technically, it's not part of the house proper. I built it with my own hands, my own money. I want it." Miranda laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. "The boathouse. Richard, really? What would you do with a boathouse? You don't even have a boat anymore. I'm keeping the yacht, remember? Along with the lake house and everything on the property. I'll buy a boat. With what money? Half our assets won't stretch as far as you think, especially not after you factor in your other obligations." Her eyes glittered with malice. "I'm sure, Ashley, excuse me, your secretary will be expecting a certain lifestyle, 24, and beautiful, isn't she? They always are." The silence stretched taut as a wire. Jessica whispered, something urgent in Richard's ear. "Fine," he said finally, his voice deadly quiet. "Keep your precious lake house. Keep everything. But I want visitation rights to the boathouse. Legal access. I built that thing from the ground up, and I'll be damned if I let you take that away." From me to Miranda's composure flickered for just an instant, a micro-expression of something that might have been fear, but it passed so quickly that only someone who had lived with her for over 2 decades would have caught it. "Visitation. Rights," she repeated slowly, "to a boathouse. Legal access," Richard pressed. "Documented in the divorce decree, 1 weekend a month, minimum. I want to be able to use what I built." Stevens looked uncertain. "That's unusual, Mrs. Whitfield." "The property would still be entirely yours, but Mr. Whitfield would have limited, specific access to the boathouse structure itself." Miranda's mind raced. The boathouse, of all the things Richard could have demanded, why that? Her fingers traced the edge of the conference table, buying time. "What's wrong, Miranda?" "Richard's Voice carried a note of triumph. Afraid I might disturb your solitude? Or is there something about that boathouse you don't want me to see? The question hung in the air like smoke. Miranda felt her heart rate spike, but her expression remained neutral. After 23 years of marriage, she knew how to read Richard's moods, his tells. This wasn't about nostalgia or sentiment. This was about suspicion. Don't be ridiculous, she said finally. It's my property, all of it. If you want to reminisce about your carpentry skills, you can do it from the public boat launch like everyone else. But Richard was smiling now, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. You know what's funny? I was going through the old photo albums last week, trying to decide what to take with me. Found some interesting pictures from that summer I built the boathouse, particularly the ones from that weekend in July when you said you were visiting your sister in Seattle. Miranda's blood turned to ice. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. You weren't in Seattle that weekend. Your sister called looking for you on Saturday night, remember? I told her you were already there, but she said she hadn't heard from you. When I asked you about it later, you got angry. Said I was tracking you like a prisoner. The room felt smaller suddenly, the air thicker. Stevens and Jessica exchanged uncomfortable glances. Ancient history, Miranda said, but her voice lacked its earlier confidence. Is it? Richard leaned forward, his eyes boring into hers. Because I also found the receipt for that concrete delivery. Funny thing about concrete ones, it's poured and set. It's pretty permanent. And you ordered a lot of it that weekend. More than we needed for just the boathouse foundation. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Miranda's hands had stopped drumming on the armrest and now gripped the leather until her knuckles went white. I don't have to listen to your paranoid fantasies, she said, rising from her chair. Stevens finalized the papers. Richard gets half the liquid assets, half the investment portfolio, and his car. Everything else stays with me, including the lake house and everything on the property. Miranda Richard started. Everything, she repeated, her voice cutting like a blade. And if you so much as set foot on my property without permission, I'll have you arrested for trespassing. Are we clear? Richard studied her face for a long moment, and what he saw there seemed to satisfy him. The smile returned, cold and knowing. Crystal clear, he said. But you know what they say about secrets, Miranda? They have a way of surfacing, especially the ones buried deep underwater. The words hit her like a physical blow. Her composure cracked completely for just an instant, long enough for everyone in the room to see the raw fear in her eyes before she slammed the mask back into place. Get out, she whispered gladly. Richard gathered his papers and stood. At the door, he paused and looked back. Enjoy your lake house, darling. I hope you sleep well knowing what's really underneath all that beautiful, still water. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the sudden silence. Miranda remained standing, her reflection multiplied in the polished conference table, each image showing a different facet of her terror. Because Richard was right about one thing. Secrets did have a way of surfacing, and some secrets, once exposed, changed everything. 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized, Miranda stood on the deck of her lake house, watching the morning mist rise from the water like ghosts seeking absolution. The coffee mug in her hands had gone cold an hour ago, but she couldn't seem to move. Below, the boathouse sat silent and dark, its weathered cedar walls hiding secrets that had festered for 7 years. Her phone buzzed. Richard's name appeared on the screen, and her stomach clenched. What do you want? She answered without preamble. Good morning to you too, darling. His voice was sickeningly cheerful. Beautiful day for a boat ride, don't you think? Miranda's eyes swept the lake. It was empty except for a lone fisherman near the far shore, too distant to be a threat. If you're calling to gloat, actually, I'm calling to share some interesting news. I had lunch with Detective Morrison yesterday. You remember him, don't you? He was at the Hendersons' barbecue last summer. Nice man, very thorough. The coffee mug slipped from Miranda's fingers, shattering on the deck. What are you talking about? Well, it's the strangest thing. We got to talking about cold cases, and he mentioned something fascinating. Did you know that every year they review unsolved missing persons cases? Modern technology, new techniques, it's amazing what they can discover now. Miranda's legs felt weak. She gripped the deck railing, her knuckles white against the wood. Richard, I don't know what game you're playing. No game, Miranda. Just conversation between old friends. Morrison was particularly interested when I mentioned that concrete delivery to our lake house. Apparently, they've been wondering about a certain missing person case from around that time. David Chen. You remember David, don't you? The name hit her like a physical blow. 7 years, and she could still see David's face, still hear his voice on that last night, still feel the weight of the shovel in her hands. I don't know what you're talking about, she whispered. Of course you don't. Just like you didn't know about Ashley until I accidentally left my phone unlocked. But here's the thing about Morrison. He's very good at his job. And when I happened to mention that you'd been acting strangely that summer, well, he became very interested indeed. Miranda closed her eyes, fighting the wave of nausea that threatened to overwhelm her. You bastard now. Now I haven't done anything wrong. I'm just being a concerned citizen. Although his voice took on a tone. I suppose I could be convinced to keep our private matters private. For the right price, blackmail. Really, Richard. After 23 years, this is what you've become. I've become a man who knows his worth, and who knows where the bodies are buried. The words carried a weight that made Miranda's blood run cold. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to transfer the lake house to my name. All of it. The house, the land, the boathouse, everything. And in return, I'll keep my mouth shut about your little construction project. Go to hell. I'm sure I will, eventually, but not before I get what's mine. You have 48 hours, Miranda. After that, I might feel compelled to share my concerns with Detective Morrison. Amazing how guilty consciences can drive people. To do the right thing, the line went dead. Miranda stood frozen, the phone still pressed to her ear, listening to the silence that seemed to echo from the depths of the lake. She hadn't thought about David Chen in months, had trained herself not to think about him, not to remember the way his eyes had looked when he realized what was happening. But now, with Richard's threat hanging over her like a sword, the memories came flooding back. David had been her contractor, hired to build the boathouse that Richard had designed. Handsome, charming, with calloused hands and an easy smile. He'd been everything Richard wasn't. Spontaneous, passionate, alive. The affair had been inevitable, a collision of loneliness and desire that had burned bright and dangerous. Until that night, in July, when everything went wrong, Miranda walked down to the boathouse, her footsteps echoing on the wooden pier. The structure looked innocent enough in the morning light, its cedar shingles weathered to a soft gray. But she could see the subtle differences if she looked carefully. The way the concrete foundation extended slightly further than necessary. The small inconsistency in the floor, where the original plans had been, modified. She pushed open the door and stepped inside. The smell of cedar and lake water filled her nostrils. Along with something else, something that might have been her imagination, but felt like guilt made manifest. The boat lift dominated the center of the space, its mechanical arms reaching down into the dark water below. Beneath that water, beneath the concrete and steel, David Chen waited. Her phone rang again. This time, it was a number she didn't recognize. Mrs. Whitfield, this is Detective Morrison with the Portland Police. I was wondering if you might have a few minutes to chat about an old case. Nothing urgent, but there are some questions that have come up regarding your property. Would this afternoon be convenient? Miranda's world tilted. Richard hadn't been bluffing. The bastard had actually called the police. Kind of. Questions? Oh, just routine follow-up. We're reviewing some old missing persons cases, and your name came up in connection with one of them. A contractor named David Chen who disappeared 7 years ago. Apparently, he was working on some construction at your lake house around the time he went missing. The words seemed to echo in the boathouse, bouncing off the walls and the water. Below, Miranda could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of 7 years of secrets pressing down on her chest. Mrs. Whitfield, are you still there? Yes, I'm sorry, Detective. This afternoon would be fine. What time? How about 2 o'clock? I'll try not to take up too much of your time. After she hung up, Miranda stood in the boathouse for a long time, staring down at the dark water. The boat lift's mechanism hummed quietly, a sound that had once been comforting but now seemed ominous. Somewhere below, in the concrete tomb she'd built with her own hands, David Chen's secrets waited to surface. She thought about running. She had money, connections, a passport. She could be in Mexico by evening, Switzerland by tomorrow. But running would only confirm Richard's suspicions. give Morrison all the proof he needed. No, she had to stay. Had to face this, but first, she had to make sure her secret stayed buried. Miranda walked to the control panel for the boat lift and pressed the button. The mechanism groaned to life, and slowly, the steel cradle began to rise from the water. As it emerged, dripping and dark, she could see the modifications she'd made. 7 years ago, the extra concrete footings, the steel reinforcement, the careful way she'd sealed everything to prevent any evidence from floating to the surface. She'd been so careful, so thorough, but now, with modern forensic techniques and a suspicious ex-husband feeding information to the police, careful might not be enough. The boat lift reached its highest position and stopped with a mechanical clunk. Miranda stared at the exposed foundation, at the place where she'd entombed her past. 7 years of silence, 7 years of lies, 7 years of living with the weight of what she'd done. Her phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "Tick-tock, darling, the clock is running." Miranda deleted the message and walked back to the house. She had 6 hours before Morrison arrived, 6 hours to figure out how to save herself from the consequences of that terrible night. When passion had turned to violence and love had become murder, as she climbed the stairs to the deck, she could hear the sound of a boat engine in the distance, getting closer. The fisherman she'd seen earlier was heading toward shore, toward her pier. As the boat came into view, she could see the occupant. Clearly, for the first time, it was Richard. He waved from the driver's seat, his smile visible even from a distance. Behind him, the lake stretched away like a mirror, reflecting the sky and the secrets that lay beneath its surface, secrets that were about to be exposed one way or another. Miranda stood frozen as her ex-husband's boat approached her dock, bringing with it the reckoning she'd spent 7 years trying to avoid. Richard's boat bumped against the dock with a soft thud that seemed to echo across the lake like a gunshot. He tied off the line with practiced ease, his movements casual and confident, as if he were arriving for a pleasant social visit, rather than delivering an ultimatum that could destroy her life. "Beautiful morning, isn't it?" he called out, stepping onto the pier. He wore khakis and a polo shirt, looking like any other weekend boater enjoying the lake. But Miranda could see the predatory gleam in his eyes, the satisfied smile of a man who held all the cards. "What are you doing here, Richard? Can't a man enjoy his own lake?" He gestured expansively at the water. "Well, almost his own lake. Give it a day or two." Miranda descended the steps from the deck, her legs unsteady, but her voice controlled. "I'm not signing anything over to you, really. That's disappointing." Richard walked to the boathouse door and peered inside. "You know, I never really appreciated this place when I was building it. Too focused on the work, I suppose. But now, looking at it with fresh eyes," he stepped inside, and Miranda had no choice but to follow. The boathouse felt smaller with Richard in it, the walls seeming to press inward. He walked around the boat lift, running his hand along the concrete foundation with the casual interest of a man examining his own handiwork. "Solid construction," he mused. "Built to last, though I don't remember pouring quite this much concrete. Funny how memory plays tricks on you, Richard. Stop playing games. Say what you came to say." He turned to face her, leaning against the steel framework of the boat lift. Behind him, the dark water lapped gently at the concrete, a sound that had once been soothing, but now felt ominous. "I talked to Morrison again this morning. Interesting fellow. Did you know they have new ground-penetrating radar technology now? Can see right through concrete, detect irregularities, empty spaces, even ... double quotes." He paused dramatically. Body's Miranda's heart hammered against her ribs. "You're fishing, am I? Morrison seemed very interested when I mentioned how much extra concrete you ordered that weekend. And when I told him about David Chen's truck being found abandoned near the lake, well, he practically jumped out of his chair. David's truck was found 20 miles from here, at a parking area accessible by boat." Richard's smile widened. Amazing how things start to make sense when you put the pieces together. A missing contractor, a concrete delivery, a guilty wife who couldn't look her husband in the eye for months afterward. The words hit her like physical blows. Miranda gripped the doorframe to steady herself, memories flooding back David's last night, the argument that had escalated beyond anything she'd imagined, the moment when everything went irreversibly wrong. "I know what happened, Miranda." Richard's voice was soft now, almost gentle. I've known for years. The question is, what are we going to do about it? You don't know anything, don't I? He pulled out his phone and scrolled through something. July 15th, 7 years ago. David Chen was supposed to meet his brother for dinner, but never showed up. His truck was found the next morning at Cascade Point Boat Launch. His tools were still in the back, his wallet in the glove compartment. Everything except David himself. Miranda closed her eyes, but the memories came anyway. David's face, flushed with anger. The shovel in her hands, heavier than she'd expected. The sickening sound it made when it connected with his skull. The police investigated, of course, Richard continued, but there were no witnesses, no evidence of foul play. David was known to be impulsive, had disappeared for days at a time before. Eventually, they assumed he'd walked away from his life, started over somewhere else. Maybe he did. Maybe, or maybe he's right here, under about 3 tons of concrete and steel. Richard tapped the foundation with his foot. Want to know what really convinced me? It wasn't the concrete order or the mysterious weekend. It was the way you acted afterward. The guilt was eating you alive, Miranda. You couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. You lost 20 pounds in 2 months. And every time anyone mentioned David's name, you looked like you were going to be sick. The truth hung between them like a loaded weapon. Miranda felt the weight of 7 years of lies, 7 years of looking over her shoulder, 7 years of living with the knowledge that one wrong word could destroy everything. What do you want? She whispered. I already told you. The lake, house, all of it. Transfer the deed to my name, and I'll make sure Morrison's investigation goes nowhere. I'll even provide him with some alternative theories about where David might have gone. And if I refuse, Richard's expression hardened. Then I call Morrison right now and tell him about my suspicions, about the concrete delivery, the timing, your behavior afterward. I give him enough to get a search warrant, maybe even bring in that ground-penetrating radar I mentioned. Miranda stared at him, seeing clearly for the first time the man she'd been married to for 23 years. Not the successful businessman or devoted husband, but a cold, calculating predator who would destroy her to get what he wanted. You'd send me to prison for murder? I'd send you to prison for killing the man you were screwing behind my back, Richard snarled, his mask finally slipping. Did you really think I didn't know? The late nights? The sudden interest in the boathouse project? The way you'd disappear for hours at a time? I knew you were having an affair, Miranda. I just never imagined you'd go as far as murder to cover it up. The admission hung in the air between them. Miranda felt something shift inside her, a cold clarity replacing the panic that had consumed her for weeks. You knew, she said slowly. You knew I was having an affair, and you did nothing. What was I supposed to do? Make a scene? Divorce you? And lose half of everything? No, I decided to wait, to be patient, to let you dig your own grave. His smile returned, cruel and satisfied. Literally, as it turns out. Miranda studied his face, seeing the years of resentment and calculation etched in every line. How long have you known about David? Known for certain, about 6 months. But I suspected from the beginning. You were never very good at hiding your emotions, darling. The guilt was written all over your face. 6 months. The words tasted bitter. You've known for 6 months, and you waited until now to use it against me. I needed the right moment, the right leverage. Amazing how a messy divorce can provide both. Miranda walked deeper into the boathouse, her footsteps echoing on the wooden planks. She stopped at the control panel for the boat lift, her hand resting on the activation switch. You know what the ironic part is, Richard? I didn't kill David because of the affair. Richard's smile faltered slightly. What? I killed him because he found out about the money. Miranda's voice was steady now, almost conversational. Daddy's inheritance that I used to buy this place, it wasn't all inheritance. Some of it came from other sources. Sources that David recognized when he saw the account numbers on some paperwork. I'd left out. What are you talking about? Embezzlement, Richard. $2.7 million skimmed from client accounts over 5 years at the firm where I used to work. I was very good at covering my tracks, very careful about the amounts and timing. But David had done work for some of those clients. He recognized the names, started putting pieces together. Richard's face had gone pale. You're lying, am I? David threatened to expose everything unless I left you and ran away with him. Said he couldn't be with someone who stole from hard-working people. Such a moral man, our David. Right up until I caved in his skull with a shovel. The boat lift hummed to life as Miranda pressed the activation switch. Slowly, the steel cradle began to descend into the water, and with it, the secret that had defined her life for 7 years. The beautiful part, Miranda continued, is that the statute of limitations ran out on the embezzlement last year. I'm free and clear on that front. But murder, that's forever, isn't it? Richard backed toward the door, understanding finally, dawning in his eyes. Miranda, what are you doing? I'm making a choice. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911. Yes, I'd like to report a boating accident. My ex-husband's boat appears to have capsized near my dock. He's in the water, and I don't think he can swim very well. Richard lunged for the door, but Miranda was faster. The steel framework of the descending boat lift caught him across the chest, driving him backward into the dark water below. He surfaced once, sputtering and gasping, his eyes wide with terror and understanding. Miranda, please, I can't. The boat lift continued its descent, its mechanical arms reaching down like steel fingers. Richard tried to swim clear, but the confined space of the boathouse worked against him. The water was deeper than it looked, deeper than anyone would expect, and the weight of his clothes dragged him down. Miranda watched from above, her phone still in her hand. The 911 dispatcher's voice, a distant buzz in her ear. Richard's struggles grew weaker, his movements more desperate, until finally the lake claimed him as it had claimed David 7 years before. When the surface stilled, Miranda lifted the phone to her ear. I'm sorry, she told the dispatcher, her voice shaking with perfectly performed grief. I think it's too late. He's gone under, and I can't see him anymore. Please send someone quickly. I tried to throw him a life preserver, but the current ... Oh God, I think he's drowned. As sirens wailed in the distance, Miranda stood in the boat. Detective Morrison arrived 20 minutes before the dive team, his unmarked sedan kicking up gravel as he pulled into Miranda's driveway. She met him on the deck, wrapped in a blanket despite the warm afternoon sun, playing the role of grieving ex-wife to perfection. Mrs. Whitfield, I'm so sorry for your loss, Morrison said, his weathered face creased with what appeared to be genuine sympathy. I know this must be incredibly difficult. Miranda dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. I just can't believe he's gone. We may have had our differences, but Richard was still the father of my children. The lie came easily. They'd never had children, but grief was supposed to make people confused, wasn't it? Can you walk me through what happened? He came by boat this morning, said he wanted to talk about some final details from the divorce. Miranda's voice caught convincingly. We went down to the boathouse. He was always proud of the work he'd done on it. We were talking, and then he went back to his boat. I was still inside when I heard this terrible splash. Morrison nodded, scribbling in his notebook. Did he seem distressed? Upset about anything? Well, the divorce was hard on both of us, and there was ... Miranda hesitated, as if debating whether to share something personal. Detective Richard had been drinking more lately. Since our separation, I could smell alcohol on his breath this morning. It was a masterful touch. Morrison's expression shifted slightly, the sympathy tinged now with understanding. Drunk boating accidents were tragically common. I see. Had he been taking any medications? Anything that might have affected his balance or judgment? Blood pressure medication, and he'd been having dizzy spells. Another lie, smoothly delivered, told him he shouldn't be out on the water alone. The dive team's truck rumbled down the driveway, followed by an ambulance and 2 more police cars. Miranda watched the parade of emergency vehicles with apparent distress, but inside she felt only cold satisfaction. Richard had underestimated her, just as David had 7 years ago. Mrs. Whitfield, Morrison said gently, I'm going to need you to stay up here while the dive team works. This is going to be difficult to watch, of course. I understand. Miranda pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Detective, there's something else I should probably mention. Richard called me yesterday. He seemed ... paranoid. Talking about old cases, missing persons, he said he'd spoken with you about some contractor who used to work here. Morrison's head snapped up, his eyes sharpening. David Chen. Yes, that was the name. Richard seemed convinced that, well, that something had happened to Mr. Chen here at the lake house. He was making wild accusations. Miranda's voice trembled with just the right amount of confusion and hurt. I think the divorce was affecting his mental state more than I realized. He was seeing conspiracies everywhere. The detective studied her face carefully. What kind of accusations? He thought that I'd hurt Mr. Chen somehow. It was ridiculous, of course. Mr. Chen finished his work and left. I paid him in full. Miranda met Morrison's eyes directly, the picture of wounded innocence. But Richard was obsessed with the idea that something sinister had happened. He even mentioned calling you about it. He did call, Morrison admitted. Yesterday afternoon, he seemed very concerned about the timing of Chen's disappearance and some construction work that had been done here. Construction work? A concrete delivery. Mr. Whitfield seemed to think it was suspicious. Miranda let confusion and dawning realization play across her features. The boathouse foundation, but that was Richard's project. He designed it, ordered all the materials. She paused, as if a terrible thought was occurring to her. Detective, you don't think Richard was planning to frame me for something, do you? As revenge for the divorce? The seed was planted perfectly. Morrison's expression grew thoughtful, and Miranda could practically see the wheels turning in his head. A bitter ex-husband making false accusations against his former wife. A man whose mental state was deteriorating under the stress of divorce. A convenient accident that prevented him from following through on his vendetta. Ma'am, I think we should continue this conversation later, after we've completed the recovery operation. Miranda nodded, playing the part of the overwhelmed widow. As Morrison walked down to coordinate with the dive team, she allowed herself a small smile. Richard had been right about one thing. She was never very good at hiding her emotions, but some emotions were easier to fake than others. The dive took 3 hours. Miranda watched from the deck as the team methodically searched the area around the dock, their movements creating ripples that spread across the lake's surface like whispers of secrets disturbed. When they finally brought Richard's body to the surface, she covered her face with her hands and sobbed convincingly. Mrs. Whitfield. Morrison climbed the steps to the deck, his expression grim. We found him. I'm very sorry. Did he suffer? The coroner will make the final determination, but it appears to be drowning. There's evidence of trauma to his head, consistent with hitting the dock or the boat as he fell. Miranda nodded, wiping her eyes. He never was a strong swimmer. I always worried about him going out on the lake alone. Morrison sat down across from her, his notebook balanced on his knee. Mrs. Whitfield, I need to ask you about something. When we brought your husband's body up, we found his phone in his pocket. The last call he made was to you, this morning. At 9:47 a.m., it lasted 14 minutes. Miranda's heart skipped, but her expression remained composed. Yes, he called to say he was coming over. We talked about trying to be civil for the sake of closure. It was actually a pleasant conversation, all things considered, and he didn't mention David Chen during that call. No, he didn't. Which makes me think yesterday's call to you was just another one of his paranoid episodes. The stress of the divorce, the drinking. She trailed off, letting Morrison draw his own conclusions. The detective closed his notebook and stood. Mrs. Whitfield, I want you to know that we take all reports seriously, including your ex-husband's concerns about David Chen. We'll be conducting a thorough investigation. Miranda felt a chill, but kept her voice steady. Of course, I want to help in any way I can. Mr. Chen was a nice man, and if something did happen to him, his family deserves answers. We may need to bring some equipment out here. Ground penetrating radar, possibly some excavation around the boathouse foundation. Whatever you need, detective. I have nothing to hide. Morrison studied her for a long moment, then nodded. We'll be in touch, and Mrs. Whitfield. I'm sorry for your loss, but I have to ask. Please don't leave town for the next few weeks. This investigation may take some time. After the police left, Miranda stood alone on her deck, watching the sun set over the lake. The water was calm again, its surface unmarked by the violence it had witnessed. 2 bodies now rested in its depths. 2 secrets that should have stayed buried forever. But as she turned to go inside, she saw something that made her blood freeze. A boat was approaching from across the lake, its running lights cutting through the gathering dusk. As it drew closer, she could see the driver, clearly a young woman with dark hair and Asian features, her face set with grim determination. The boat pulled up to Miranda's dock, and the woman stepped out with practiced ease. She was, perhaps, 30, dressed in jeans and a windbreaker, with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to being taken seriously. "Mrs. Whitfield," the woman's voice carried across the water, clear and strong. "My name is Lisa Chen. I'm David's sister. I think it's time we talked." Miranda gripped the deck railing, her knuckles white against the wood. 7 years of carefully constructed lies, 7 years of buried secrets, and now the past was walking up her pier with David's eyes and David's stubborn chin. "I've been watching the news," Lisa continued, climbing the steps to the deck. "Very convenient. Your ex-husband drowning right when he was about to expose what really happened to my brother. Very convenient indeed." The two women faced each other in the fading light, hunter and prey, truth and lies, past and present, colliding in a confrontation that would determine whether Miranda's secrets stayed buried forever, or whether justice would finally surface from the depths of the lake. "You killed him," Lisa said simply. "You killed David, and now you've killed your husband to cover it up. But I'm not Richard, Mrs. Whitfield. I'm not going to try to blackmail you or play games with you. I'm going to prove what you did, and I'm going to make sure you pay for it." Miranda stared at her across the deck, seeing in Lisa's face the ghost of the man she'd murdered 7 years ago. The lake stretched out behind them, dark and still, holding its secrets close. But secrets, as Richard had warned, had a way of surfacing, and sometimes they brought friends.